Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. In this video, I want to look at the chart of Bobby Fischer, the famous American chess player, chess champion. This one is by request. Guys, don't forget to hit the like button and hit subscribe if you have not already. First, let's just get an overview of Bobby Fischer, what he did. So he's American chess grandmaster, 11th world chess champion, a chess prodigy. Won his first record of 8 U.S. championships at the age of 14. So he's a child prodigy. And then he went on to win the world championship. I don't know how many times, once or maybe twice. Then he disappeared for some reason. He refused to defend his title when the agreement could not be reached over match conditions. Disappeared from the public eye. 1992, he reemerged with an unofficial rematch against Spassky. It was held in Yugoslavia, which was under UN embargo at the time. His participation led to a conflict with the U.S. government, which warned Fischer that his participation in the match would violate executive orders against Yugoslavia. They issued a warrant for his arrest. He lived as an emigre. He was arrested in Japan for passport revoked. Granted Icelandic citizenship, and then he lived there until his death. He made lasting contributions to chess. He wrote a book, blah, 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 and he patented a modified chess timing system. It's now standard practice. He also invented Fischer random chess, known as chess 960, chess variant, randomized to 960 possible positions. He was full Jew, which I'll get to, but he was also anti-Semitic. So that shows the kind of psychological. He was also paranoid, a lot of people thought, and he was very hateful towards Jews, but he was Jewish. His mother was a Jew, and then his father was believed to be not the father that he gets his last name from, Fischer, but a guy named Paul Nemeni, who actually raised him along with his mother, or at least paid very close attention to him and gave them money. And he was a Jew, and they believed that he was the father. Made monthly child support payments, and they believed that he was the father. In any case, he was either half Jew or full Jew, but he was fully anti-Semitic, which is crazy. Self-hating Jew. It happens. But he was a child prodigy, and let's just get into the astrology now. He has a difficult chart to read, I'm not going to lie. Some things are very obvious, some things are kind of obfuscated, a little cloudy, confusing, but let's get into it. Right off, he's got this amazing kite formation. In fact, the Grand Air Trine, not only is a Grand Air Trine, but 2 planets at 0 degrees and 1 at 1 degree, which is fantastic. So air trines for brilliance. We see this with Jordan Peterson, with Alex Jones. He's really these great intellects, right? Very powerful intellect. 0 degrees of any sign is just going off into the unlimited, right? Because it's like the immature, the baby, the child that doesn't know their own the beginner's mind in Zen that don't know their own limitations. And so it's just going off into like the furthest, it's like the purest expression of that sign, right? Not the mature expression, the pure, unadulterated expression of that sign. So 0 degrees, Uranus in Gemini, brilliant. With Saturn in Gemini, right? Very scientific, very, Saturn is really a scientific planet, along with Uranus, both of them. And in Gemini, really, they can both really excel. Neptune for the imagination, and yeah, mostly just subconscious imagination, being able to think really very big, broad. And then Mars in Aquarius, Mars is a much more contracted thinker, very mechanical oriented. Mars is not purely physical. Mars can be very intellectual, but relating more to tying it into the physical realm with mechanics and things like that, right? In Aquarius, again, very brilliant. 0 degrees. Aquarius is often the sign of the genius, but so is, and then Uranus is the planet of the genius. So, I mean, look how tight this grand trine is. Fantastic, right? Neptune is in the 3rd house, and the third whole sign house. So 3rd house fully. So the intellect, the 11th, 7th, these are air houses, right? So it's brilliant. It's quite brilliant. Yeah, Mars is on the set, right on the descendant, and this is very difficult for relationships. Makes him quite bossy, aggressive, demanding, controlling. Mars, the people with Mars in the 7th, they really like to control all their relationships. Mars is really going towards the other person. Good for leadership type stuff, especially like, where you need to be more aggressive, bossy, like police, army, military, things of that nature, or just leadership in general. If you have the authority to withhold, to be able to, nobody wants to be bossed around, but if you're in a position of leadership or authority, such as in the military or any armed service type stuff, security, stuff like that, then it's warranted. Otherwise, it comes off as too aggressive, bossy, difficult. Right? And then it's rounded up. This grand trine's rounded up by 0 degrees ascendant in Leo, super confident. And then Pluto, even though it's 5 degrees, it's not really it's still tied in because of the ascendant. So this Pluto and ascendant in Leo, powerful, arrogant, confident. It's a lot. Like, this guy he may be brilliant, but he's not an easy character to deal with at all. Like, he's just, we'll get to that. He was paranoid, but he might have been rightfully paranoid in some occasions anyway. He thought at one point the Russians were colluding against him in a tournament, and that other people agreed with him, actually, and they changed the setup because what they did was they quickly drawed between themselves, and then they kind of ganged up on him. In order, I guess I'm not a chess player really at all, so I don't know how it goes, but I guess exhaustion is the kind of thing, and if you conserve your energy, and then you can wear out an opponent that way, like if you have more energy than them. And they did that. They conserved their energy together and then kind of ganged up on him. So they changed the way they did these tournaments because he called them out on it. But let's go to his sun. So his sun is in Pisces, and you can see with the MC being in the 9th whole sign house, that these houses are crowded. In any case, Pisces is the 8th whole sign house, and technically this is in the 8th quadrant, but coming up in the 9th cusp. So a lot of 8th house, but 9th house as well, somewhat. And 8th house is, that deep hidden house, Scorpio's original house. I have my sun in the 8th house, so it allows for very deep thinking, underground sort of penetrating. The sun doesn't really shine here, but it illuminates all the hidden things in the 8th house. Unlike the 12th house, where there's that underground secret hidden quality, but the alter ego as well. The 8th house provides no alter ego. It's just sort of like hidden and dimming and periodic death of the ego, right? You can lose your reputation with sun in the 8th house, or certain planets in the 8th house, because of that dimming, that death then rebirth of those planets. So sun representing ego, sun representing the worldly persona. There can be periods of loss of reputation or just loss. And we saw that, where one of the things about Bobby Fischer is he disappeared for 20 years. That's an 8th house thing. You know, you might see that with 12th house, but the loss or the disappearance and then the reemergence is a very 8th house thing. The 12th house is just kind of loss, right? It's loss with no return. The 8th house is loss, the return, the rebirth, right? The resurrection. I guess that would be an 8th house theme. The resurrecting of Christ, or whatever. You know, it's a common theme throughout mythology as well. Resurrection. That's an 8th house theme. Pisces is, again, very creative, mystical. He might have had some strong intuitive help with his chess playing ability. I left Pallas Athena in here because it's close to the sun, and Pallas, if you recall the mythology of Perseus defeating Medusa, he was aided by Hermes and Athena, Pallas Athena. And Hermes is Mercury. Hermes provided the sword of discrimination, and Pallas Athena gave him the shield of wisdom and reflection in battle. So Pallas Athena is an asteroid, so it's not a major influence, but when it's conjuncting another planet, it can provide insight into their ability to think. In any case, Pallas Athena provides wisdom and strategy. Chess is very strategic, and pattern recognition, right? I have my Pallas conjunct Mercury, so that's also a very good combination for me in my analytical abilities. But for him, that's also really helping in his 8th house conjunct the sun, to think deep and to recognize patterns and to have that strategy, right? The sun is trine and Pallas, an exalted Jupiter. And this is really good too. Jupiter is in very good condition. It's in the 12th house. 12th and 8th do well together because they're both secret, hidden. So he could really understand the underlying secret. It's also psychology. He's psychologizing the other person. He's understanding them, penetrating their mind, penetrating the secrets of the game and the underlying what's going on beneath the surface, really thinking in a very deep, hidden way with the double water influence of water houses, water signs, right? And then Jupiter also is exalted in Cancer, but it rules Pisces. So it's bonifying the sun to a very high degree because of the trine and the placement. This is really, really strong, right? Sun is ruling the ascendant. It's the ascendant lord, right? So sun is going into the 8th house, mostly 8th. It is bringing some 9th house influence. So that is another issue, which I'll get to, like his relationship to religion. But and then Jupiter is also religious signification, religion, philosophy, faith, all that. That's really bonifying his and Jupiter as an intellect. Jupiter rules wisdom, philosophy, but it helps person see the big picture. So like whatever you're going into, you know, Mercury is the small picture, the details, the minutia. Jupiter is understanding the totality of it. So you'll need a Jupiterian wisdom for chess, because you can't just you can't, you know, in anything really, you don't want to get lost. You know, how's the saying going? Unable to see the forest through the trees, right? Jupiter allows you to see the forest, the whole picture, the bird's eye view, right? the 30,000 foot view. That is really important to understand the big picture with anything, right? But especially if you want to be a grandmaster in chess, you need to have a strong Jupiterian influence, right? And so this is excellent. This is really, really prominent. Bonifying his son, really giving a lot of, helping out the dignity of his son a lot, and bringing in foreign influence to his son. And his son is not just his son, you know, we all have a son, but this is also his ascendant lord. So helping out not helping out, bringing in foreign influence. And he was, you know, he moved a lot, right? Definitely had a lot of foreign influences. Moon's in Taurus. So Moon's already exalted here in Taurus, well in the 10th house, right? 10th whole sign house, 10th quadrant. Very, and it's exactly square the ascendant and Pluto and Mars. Exactly square the, well, yeah, I mean, almost square. You're right in between the ascendant and Pluto, and then square Mars as well by 2 degrees. So that's quite difficult. You know, he had mental issues, even though his moon is exalted in Taurus, so very stable. The square to Mars and Pluto and the ascendant, less so the ascendant, but more with Mars and Pluto. That's really destructive, because Mars is, you know, especially Pluto, squares to Pluto or something you really want to watch out for. Moon is very sensitive. It would have been much worse had he had his, you know, if Moon was in Scorpio, or Moon was in any bad sign, or just even in a neutral, Moon in Aries, Moon in Gemini, Moon in, right, any of the other signs. That would have been worse, but he got off easy. But you know, Mars and Pluto, these are both very aggressive signs, so it's not surprising. You know, Pluto's also conjunct his ascendant, Mars opposite these, you know, conjunct the descendant, that he had hateful views towards himself, towards his own people, the Jews, right? I mean, he was really aggressive. Like he wrote that, you know, like he was kind of wishing death upon Jews. Like he wrote that, you know, even if he was nice in person to other Jews personally, he would write like, oh, they should start randomly killing Jews. Like, and he admired Hitler and all the, you know, anti-Semitic propaganda. So the guy was kind of crazy, because he was talking about him, if they start randomly killing Jews, that he would be one of them. His mother was a Jew. Hitler, the only prerequisite for the Nazis was that your mother was Jewish. They didn't care what you believed. They didn't care where your loyalties were. They didn't care how religious you were, or if you're religious. You could have been the most fervent German patriot who didn't care about being Jewish, but if your mother was Jewish, off to the gas chambers with you. You know what I mean? Like, it really, that's what, and that's kind of what solidified the, you know, one of the things, I mean, there's lots of things like that, but that really solidified Judaism for a lot of Jews, regardless of what they believe. They're just like, look, if the world's gonna kill us just because our mother's Jew, then we might as well, you know, make that a priority, because they're coming after us. So, you know, just, our mother's Jewish, regardless of what we believe, we're Jews. And that still holds true. You know, there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there, especially nowadays, when people are afraid, they start you know, wanting to point fingers and stuff like that. Any case, that's crazy that he was so anti-Semitic, like fervently so, like basically wanting to be a Nazi, wanting to kill Jews, and he himself is a Jew. Okay. But we can see that with the Pluto, especially the Pluto, but Mars is, it's definitely helping out there. Square the nose, this T square, that's, and then Pluto conjunct the ascendant. But Pluto is also helping, Pluto square the moon, Mars square the moon in Aquarius. That's also helping him be more strategic. Pluto's the mastermind. Pluto is all about, Pluto's the puppet master. It's way out, it's furthest out planet that we, the main planets that we use. has tremendous amount of influence, is incredibly powerful, but what it wants is power and control. And it wants to, you can think of like Pluto almost like, or in the negative sense, right? As something like a Klaus Schwab, somebody who wants to like, you will own nothing and be happy. We own all the cabinet members of all the countries, stuff like that, like this really crazy person, psychopath who wants to mastermind the whole world, really. That's that sort of thing. Pluto wants to take control, wants to mastermind, and you have all these chess pieces, and that's how Pluto thinks. Pluto's lording over and being like, oh, how do I take control of the whole board? That's really Pluto's nature. It's very penetrating, very deep thinking, but loves power and control, right? It's the scorpionic influence, and it's very powerful in Leo because there harnesses the ego. Pluto loves power and control, and what better placement besides its domicile in Scorpio than to be in Leo, where it's the full power of the ego, and that's something that a psychopath wants. And Pluto definitely has psychopathic tendencies. I'm not saying that everyone with a strong Pluto is a psychopath. Quite the contrary. There's another impulse to Pluto, which is to, the scorpionic impulse to elevate, to evolve. And it brings a lot of change, transformation, crisis, things of that nature, right? But, and it depends how you take it, because there's 7 billion people. We can have so many different expressions of all these planets, right? And they'll express themselves differently at different points in our lives, depending on, a whole bunch of other factors as well. It's not just, one size fits all. I'm not trying to paint it negatively. I think he was, exploring different parts of himself, trying to figure it all out, right? He took to Christianity, by the way, and then he took to one brand, and then he abandoned it later, and he said, oh, it's satanic, right? It's satanic. And Satanism has, it's not talked about much. People like to point fingers at, Judaism because it's easier to criticize, but we all know that and I'm not saying like there's not Satanism in Judaism. There's Satanism in all the religions, but it's well established in Christianity as well, in Catholicism and in Mormonism, and in probably many other brands. But he explicitly, he left the church that he belonged to and explicitly criticized them for being satanic. Then he moved into Catholicism, which Catholicism, and I'm not saying all Catholics are nothing like that they're satanic, but the Vatican is satanic. You can, they have one of their big altars with the it's Lucifer. They have a big statue with all this background stuff, and it's Lucifer falling from heaven. And their big hall in the Vatican is the viper's fangs and face. And the whole drinking blood, eating, that's satanic. That's satanic black mass. Satanism has heavily influenced the Catholic Church. And I'm not saying that all Catholics are on board with this. They might be trying to practice a very, pure version of Catholicism in their mind. I'm not saying that, but there definitely is Satanism in Catholicism. So it's all, we live in a very corrupt world, right? Yeah. And of course, there are Jews who are also Satan or pretend to be Jews. Satanism has really, it's the worship of the ego is what it is, Satanism. And these people have infiltrated everything, right? These egotists, these psychopaths, right? But we don't need more division. We don't need to be like, it's their fault. It's their fault. It's corruption. It's and it gets everywhere. It gets into everything. In any case. All right. Where was I? This Pluto is very powerful though, and excellent for chess, right? Because of the strategic and deep thinking. It's also making him very vengeful, right? Like he disappears, but then he wants a rematch, right? He's kind of like, he's a bit I don't know. He's not very smooth. Well, I don't know, not in his personality. I don't mean his personality, but he's like, he has this thing of needing to win, and it's very plutonic, like win at all cost. Like he has to be the best. He has to be the grandmaster. He has to be the world champion. That's very Pluto, especially in Leo. Jupiter square Venus. This is a very indulgent square because these are both planets of excess, of they're both benefics. Venus is what we enjoy, our pleasure, our leisure, women, especially for men, our creativity. Jupiter is our faith, our optimism, our expansion. And with a square like this can show like excessiveness. It's bringing out the more material, like worst qualities of each planet. It's worse for Venus here because Venus is in detriment, and so this is bringing out the very negative Venus. Very negative Venus is making Venus quite difficult to. He has a hard time enjoying himself, right? Especially in Aries. And the MC being in Aries, being in the ninth whole sign house, shows that religion is going to play a major important role in his life. And this square to Venus also is having to do with religion and public image. It's giving him a bad image, to be honest, I believe, because publicly there was a lot of contention, especially around foreign issues. Jupiter's in the 12th house, Moon is ruling it, and that has the squares as well. So a lot of stuff around foreign travel, foreign issues, problems with foreigners and homeland, obviously, run-ins with the government, even that would be 10th house MC related. Yeah, and he was very, what's the word, pugnacious, I guess, when he had the dispute with the government, going against the government's wishes. He spat, and he said, "That's my response." I think he spat on something. I can't remember. If it was easy to pull up, I would, but I have to sit through the whole Wikipedia, and I don't want to waste the time. So like, yeah, like really like aggressively anti. I guess he had an antisocial side to him. Antisocial kind of means in the psychological sense, like psychopathy. I'm not saying he was a psychopath. No, I think he had empathy. He had, but honestly, psychopathy, I would look to Scorpio and Pluto. So he had that side to himself that's just like so deeply aggressive and destructive. It is square his moon and conjunct his ascendant, and pretty much opposite Mars. Even alone, if these were, leave the moon alone, Mars, even 5 degrees opposite Pluto, that's going to be very aggressive, very oppositional, confrontational, right? Creating conflict for himself with others, especially in this axis here, especially with the moon. Like, this is really difficult to handle. And then this moon Venus, he's crabby, he's cranky, he's not he's dissatisfied, especially publicly. The Jupiter is in his subconscious. It's hidden. This is not going to come out very easily. It's trying his sun, so you're going to get some of that influence there. But publicly, we got the moon, which is good, but it's square Mars and Pluto. And then we got the Venus square Jupiter. His public image is not great, right? He is very public because Moon and Venus, very, visible in the public, but not great. And then, but the sun in the 8th, you can also hide. Sun in Pisces in the 8th, right? We got this grand trine with Mars and Saturn. Mars, Uranus, Saturn. That's very good. What else? South Node, Mercury. I didn't even talk about this. This is very prominent. Oh yeah, Mercury and Saturn are in mutual reception, not by degree, but by sign. Mercury is in Saturn's sign, Saturn's in Mercury's sign. So Mercury is tied into this grand trine plus South Node and in Aquarius. Aquarius, again, is that brilliant genius kind of thinking, really outside the box. South Node Mercuries in general are very intelligent, very intellectual. Here's where the detail comes in, the small mind, the intellect, the ability to focus and really pay attention to, you know, the minute details. Again, that's very important for anything that requires a technical level of, you know, intellectual sophistication. The guy's loaded with intellect. I mean, just extremely powerful intellect. I wonder if it could have been sort of translated into any other field, but he wanted it to be chess. So it was chess. Probably this Pluto, I think, because of the need for Pluto to really control and to be the master. And then he became the world champion. And, you know, maybe if he went to another field, then it wouldn't have, you know, it wouldn't have met the ego criteria of this, you know, Leo ascendant 0 degrees plus conjunct Pluto. Very, you know, the egotistical needs here are very, very strong, right? So he needed to be the world champion. I think that's probably why. And then chess was just the natural. And it was probably just a calling. I mean, if you look at it from a spiritual angle, it was probably what he had decided on before he was born to focus on. Let's see here. So yeah, Mercury, and then Mercury's ruling 12th and third house cusp, second whole sign, but third house cusp. So yeah, I mean, it's just bringing in tons of intellectual prowess. And he's got his north node. It's on the 8th house cusp here, but it's 7th whole sign out, so 7th, 8th, right? The ability to, and, you know, being able to relate intellectually to others, that's very strong. Here we're going into the first, second, but more Leo again. Chiron is the outcast. And again, once I'm not sure how old he was when he disappeared, but Chiron is very intellectual and can also relate to science fiction. It's in between Saturn and Uranus, so it carries some of the intellectual prowess of those. But it's a very odd, unique planet, very outcast, wounds, rejection, that sort of thing. And then it being in the first house and in Leo, damaging his ego, right? Especially as he gets older, wounded. And then with this Pluto here, conjunct the ascendants, where the moon, like, he really has a need to prove himself. And he's, you know, this is probably not so good because of the negative qualities of Chiron, really damaging his pride, his ego. And then like the Pluto, it just will not give up. Really wants to prove himself, needs to be the best, needs to be world champion with a vengeance, right? So there's that kind of tension with Bobby Fischer that is very painful, and you know, just get a feeling of narcissism, wounded. You know, people thought he was paranoid, quite rightly so. Mental illness, that sort of thing. You know, why so hateful? Why so hateful towards, you know, your own people, right? It doesn't make sense. If Jews are so bad, he would be included. Like, kill the Jews? Okay, you're next, Bobby Fischer. right? Why don't you start with yourself? That sort of thing, which people do. People hate themselves. People kill themselves, right? People, have all sorts of mental issues. With a lot of mental illness is about self-hatred, right? So that sort of thing. Squares to the moon, especially with Pluto, but Mars as well. That's very, very difficult, right? North Node Chiron. So as you can see, he's an intellectual genius, no doubt, with endless, kind of strategic abilities, masterful, right? But at the same time, very difficult. Like nobody should wish to be somebody like this, because yeah, they're genius on some level, but deeply hurt and pained. Something about his childhood with Moon here, and then Venus is ruling the IC here. So early childhood, rise to fame, notoriety, but the square to Jupiter, that's not good. I mean, Jupiter, it is good in a way because Jupiter's in good dignity here, and Jupiter rules Pisces, the sign of Venus's exaltation. So Jupiter's Venus's exaltation lord, but the square and Venus's poor dignity here is not great. So it's multiple issues going on here. Let's see. Pluto's also, sorry, Pluto. Pisces is also ruled by Neptune. That's in the third house. So dispositing here in the third of this grand trine, the sun, just trying to pick up on anything that I missed. It's a light square here, but it's not really, because these are trine and sine, so I think that's okay. Here we get an inconjunct between Moon and Neptune. Okay, yeah, that's important because that shows delusions, fantasy delusions from the mind. Moon inconjunct Neptune by 1 degree. That's pretty prominent. Moon has a lot of bad aspects, but nothing really good. It's 2 squares, part of a T square, and an inconjunct to Neptune. So this is really devastating to the Moon. And so that can really explain why he had such a hard time, mentally with his Moon's emotional satisfaction. So he's very, on the one hand, satisfied by public, fame, notoriety, being, he needs to be on the top, right? Because planets that are so high in the 10th house, square the ascendant, there's a need to be on the top, to be the best, to be, that's one of the things about planets here. The need to be above others, right? To be famous, to be the best, to be on top. But so he gained satisfaction from that, and and he made millions of dollars, by the way, so that also satisfied him. Good food, comfort, money, all that. What else? Jupiter is ruling 6th quadrant, 6th cusp here, but 5th whole sign house. And if we look at the 5th, then he had foreign children. He had a Japanese wife, and therefore a half Japanese daughter, and then a half Filipino daughter, who claimed there was some dispute about that, but I'm not sure if there was another child as well. But at least at least one foreign child and one claimed foreign child. So that is interesting. And then, of course, a lot of foreign fair Jupiter's dispositing the sun, ruling the 8th whole sign, 9th quadrant. So definitely a lot of foreign involvement, which you have. All right, let's just check out the draconic chart real quick. I don't think this is as telling, but let's see here. Mars square Saturn. Mars square Saturn, that's kind of violent, potentially. Physical aggression, physical, Saturn's it's an air sign. This is more intellectual though, so intellectually aggressive, I think. Fighting against authority, stuff like that. With Uranus there, kind of explosive anger, potentially. Mercury again in Libra, that's tying into this grand trine, air sign, south node, third house, that's very prominent telling. And then two more planets in air sign, Libra, Sun and Pallas Athena. So again, heavily drawing and playing into this air grand trine. Venus in Scorpio here. That's not so good. Venus is in detriment here. Moon in Sag. Moon opposite Saturn. Not so good for the moon. Not great for relationships in general. Saturn and Moon. Moon is very sensitive. Moon does not like Saturn. Far too restrictive. Yeah. Let's see what else. Here we have, this is interesting. Saturn in domicile in Capricorn. So Saturn here is very strong. But then Uranus is directly in conjunct Saturn here. Which is interesting because it's conjunct and then in conjunct. So interesting, weird, I don't know, interesting combination, draconic to natal. Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter's okay in Aquarius. It's not terrible, but I've seen it, act pretty well, especially for the intellect. It's quite good. 7th house, more air influence. Ascendant and Pluto. Pluto's inching its way closer to the sun. So again, more of that destructive, but very powerful, deep intellectual ability. Pluto has that dual side. It can create real genius, especially like penetrating, psychological, deep thinking and the mastermind, but as well as quite destructive as well, potentially. Neptune here. This is interesting because Neptune is in conjunct Moon here, and now we're coming into a conjunct here. So definitely there's some fantasy illusion, going on there. I don't know about drugs and alcohol. He would be wise to stay away from them, but potential delusion. But also heightened imagination. And that's and Neptune, I think it'd be really good combined with a strong, Mercury, Saturn, that sort of thing, for being able to imagine, multiple moves ahead in the game of chess. You'll need that as well. Like studying other geniuses, Tesla, Einstein, you see a very prominent Neptune as well, right? Because you have to have the ability to imagine, and that's Neptune. And if you can combine that with like a strong enough Mercury and Saturn that's going to be more contractive, then you can pull the imagination down into more tangible, grounded reality. But as well with the squares, that shows delusion, fantasy. All right, that's it for the draconic. Jupiter, by the way, is very slow. It's retrograde, but it's going direct in 2 days after his birthday. So it's very slow, so it's very potent, right? And that's good for that big picture ability to see, to understand the big picture of things. Also for philosophy, religion in general, faith, but yeah, I already talked about that. In any case, definitely a genius, but a tortured genius. somebody who hates himself, hates his own people, and is delusional and quite cruel. Maybe not in reality, but at least in thought, right? He never actually committed any acts of violence, but he did write some very violent things towards the Jews, which would have included himself. It makes no sense. That's crazy. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. And that's pretty much it. And don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment below, and book a reading with me. Macroastrology.com, that's my website. Macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com is my email. And I will see you again soon, I think.